This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on issues in export sector during COVID-19 pandemic. The participants are DGFIEO Mr. Ajay Sahai and Special Correspondent Mattu JP Singh.
In view of current COVID pandemic, Commerce Minister has been interacting with various associations. So, sir, what are the challenges pertaining to exports in present times?
Let me first compliment the Commerce Minister for constantly engaging with the export sector over the video conferencing in this difficult time. In fact, there are a couple of challenges in exports, both in the short term, medium term and long term. At present, our biggest challenge is that since a lot of orders are getting cancelled or postponed, whatever little orders which we have, we want to execute them in time. For executing them in time, we want the factories to be open to execute them. At the moment, only the factories which are producing essential goods are allowed to open. What we are requesting the different agencies of the government that all the exporting companies may be allowed to run with a minimum workforce. Of course, adhering to whatever safety, health or social distancing norms which has been prescribed for us. The second challenge we are now facing is with regard to executing the orders which are in the pipeline. So, in respect of those orders, we also want that the entire logistics chain should be addressed. The other challenge which we are facing, particularly in the lifestyle product, is the huge cancellation which we all are having, and the demand is going to take a very large hit in months to come, as people will be extremely cautious of buying, as many jobs are now at the chopping head. And this causes a lot of problem. We also feel that many countries, they have already announced a huge stimulus to export sector. We rightly have our social priority and we may not have the adequate resources to provide much competitiveness to export in such situation. How we sail through that is an issue. We are also conscious of the fact that the demand itself will be low, and this has been borne out by the recent announcement by the WTO also, where they expect the demand to decline by anywhere between 13 to 32%. And if that happens, it will impact all the countries and will have bearing on our exports also, as historically, Indian exports growth has been much attuned to the growth in the global trade. So if the global trade is showing sign of decline, it becomes very difficult for us to manage that. And my bigger concern will be with regard to the employment-intensive sector, as not only the foreign exchange, they are extremely vital for creating jobs into the countries. And as of now, the sectors like apparel, footwear, handicraft, carpets, they are now facing huge hit. How we help those sectors to look into the domestic market or look into the alternative markets are some of the issues which we are struggling at this moment. But I'm sure that since Indian entrepreneurs have the adequate resources strategy, they will bounce once the situation improves.
So you just mentioned about the logistics issues and the overall problems which we are sort of facing right now. Looking at how are these issues in logistics coming in the way and what can we do about it?
If you look into the export logistics, it's basically a cycle. If any grid in the entire chain is missing, you can't execute an export or import transaction. If you are looking into the export transaction, it starts with the factory, ends at the port, and then the bank. A lot of agencies are required to execute an order. We have challenges starting from the factories, because if the factories are not open, how you take out the goods from the factories. There are little difference of opinion also of various state agencies whether all kind of transportation is allowed or only essential goods transportation is allowed. Some of the states have put restriction on interstate movement of goods. While ports and dry ports are operating, there is acute shortage of truckers, trailer operators and workers at the various agencies. We have seen that offices of many of the shipping lines which are not in the port, they are in the cities, they are not operating. So how to get the original documents which are required to be sent abroad. Couriers are not functioning, only one or two reputed couriers, and that too in few cities are operating. That's also put a challenge. In the logistics sector, a bigger challenge for us is the mismatch between imports and exports. Since factories are not operating, we are not getting much items for exports. So imports are happening, but export is not happening. With the result, those ships or the air freighter who are coming to India, they are not getting corresponding goods when they are moving out. With the result, many of the shipping lines, they are not at all inclined to commit because either they increase and put it on the importers. But this is a bigger challenge which we are struggling it at the port also. Since factories are not operating, many ports, many CFS, they are virtually now overflowing with the containers and nobody is coming forward to take out the containers. Because the worry of the industry is that if they take out the containers, from where they take the containers, because if they bring it to the factory, first of all, there is no loader available, and secondly, the factories are not open. So that's why we are now pitching it that government allows the export industry to start operation with a minimum of the workforce. But we do admit that this is an extraordinary situation, and I hope that since the numbers are now manageable, we may see little selective lockdown uplifting also. And therefore, I feel that the worst is over. And from here only, we should improve the situation. It's good that now there is not much migration happening into the countries. Laborers are available where they are. So once the partial lockout starts, the things will definitely improve.
So as we see it, the situation must be similar pertaining to export and imports in other countries also. So where do you see all this, especially in the pharma sector?
In the pharma sector, government has taken a couple of measures, and rightly so, because first of all, we have to look into that we serve our own population, and that's why government has initially brought restriction on many of the pharma products also. Subsequently, looking into the demand and supply situation, they have lifted the restriction. On some of the key pharma products, we are still seeing the restriction continuing. But the good thing is that the pharma companies are now flush with orders. They are increasing the capacities also. And since they are part of the essential services, we are seeing a lot of export happening in the pharmaceutical sectors also. Pharma sector has done very well. If one look into the data between April to February before the crisis, we were growing at around 11% when overall exports was little negative. And this is a sector where we are pinning our hopes on. So the COVID-19 in fact has given us a lesson also that we need to look into our import diversification also, particularly for the APIs and formulation. And we need to look into whether we can have these industry in our own country. If we want to be pharmacy of the world, it is equally important that we have the strategic industry which supplies raw material to these pharma companies. And I'm sure that now government will be very keen that in some of the APIs, India has developed the necessary capability. Secondly, also, it makes sense that we diversify our source of import. We should not rely on one country for our 90% of the requirement. It is good that we have talked about diversification of exports, and recently also the Prime Minister has given a call for diversification of export in market and product. But I feel that the diversification of import should also start. And more importantly, some of the strategic sector, the manufacturing should take place into the country, and therefore whatever fiscal support needs to be given, whatever economy of scale has to be built, that may be looked into. I won't mind that if some of the critical industry, the same are produced in the public sector undertaking, and even in the public sector undertaking, they are incurring a loss for a reason. They are helping the value-added pharmaceutical exports to happen from the country. So I think these kinds of initiatives needs to be taken. I am firm believer that pharmaceutical is the sector where we have tremendous potential, but we need to move into up in the value chain. We should not be in basic bulk drugs only. We should move to the formulation. We should need to move to the critical sector of pharma sector also.
Taking it forward, how do we harness, say, the opportunities which post-COVID situation may yield? How do you think it will just sort of, say, benefit India?
The indication which we are getting is that a lot of countries are looking into taking out their manufacturing from China. and they are also looking into an alternative source of supply other than China. That gives me huge encouragement that there is an opportunity for us to attract investment from many countries in India. I was very glad to see that Japan is looking into the further diversification of their manufacturing from China to the rest of the world, and India definitely is one of the obvious choices. We have a huge market, and in fact now, since our wages are very competitive, we have a corporate taxation which is very competitive. This is the ideal time to attract investment into the country for looking into some of the sector. Secondly, we feel that China's image has taken definitely a hit, more so into the edible products. And therefore, for next 2 to 3 years, there will be huge demand in respect of the edible product which China was supplying. And that's why I feel that in most edible product sector, maybe if you're talking about the marine, or if you're talking about cereals, you're talking about the processed food, we will have huge opportunity. These are the sectors where major capacities needs to be built. We also feel that US in particular will also diversify its imports from China to other countries. The crucial question is that when you are looking into the economies of the size of US, you should have the huge capacity in your country so that you replace countries like China. We have seen that a lot of companies in US were much interested to buy from India during the tariff war also, and the trend will further accentuate now. But the critical issue is whether you have the wherewithal to serve a large market like US. So I feel that capacity creation is definitely an issue into the country. We need to look into how we quickly build on the capacities in our country to take into these markets. But every crisis also gives you some opportunity also. I feel that in a knowledge-based sector, still the market will be there, and therefore when we are talking about pharmaceuticals, when we are talking about the biotechnology, when we are talking about technology-based sectors, they will definitely bounce back. We have to see how we now compete basically in lifestyle products where demand is taking a hit and competition is intensifying. I personally feel that we need to provide some additional support to the labor-intensive sectors of exports, particularly as they may not compete effectively with the countries who are providing huge support. The bottom line is when the demand itself takes a hit and the size of cake becomes smaller, the competition intensifies and price becomes a very sensitive matter in such cases. That's why we have proposed to the government that some additional incentive, let us say of 3 or 4%, may be given to the labor-intensive sectors in the country. We also have to see at this point of time that a lot of fiscal support will be needed by the industry, and that's why I feel there is urgent need to increase the flow of credit to the industry. First of all, that policy design should come as a part of the economic stimulus package for the industry. And more importantly, we have to ensure that credit flows actually takes place. Unfortunately, in the past, Indian banks were extremely cautious to lend. This kind of trend needs to be overcome so that there is adequate flow to the industry for all times to come. I know that Indian entrepreneurs are quite enterprising. They have their strategy in place to take out all these challenges. Situation also will evolve over a period of time, but it is extremely important that in this hour of crisis, we provide them the helping hand to survive so that they take on when the market improves.
Thank you, sir, for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on issues in the export sector during COVID-19 pandemic. The participants were DGFIEO, Mr. Ajay Sahai, and Special Correspondent Mattu JP Singh. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.com. You can also follow us on the News on AIR app for updates. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.